I delivered the eulogy at my grandmother's funeral, and honestly, that was the only moment I allowed myself to feel anything at all. Standing there in front of 200 people, looking down at the simple casket covered in white roses, her favorite, I kept my voice steady, professional, detached. Because that's what I'd trained myself to be over the past 15 years of my career. A surgeon doesn't have the luxury of falling apart in the operating room, and I wasn't about to start now. What I didn't expect was to see them there. My parents. Standing in the back row, wearing expressions that could only be described as calculated interest. They didn't cry. They didn't even pretend to look sad. They just watched me with those cold, assessing eyes I remembered from childhood, the ones that always made me feel like a burden they couldn't wait to shed. I was 7 the last time I saw them before that day. 7 years old, standing on Grandma Rose's porch with a garbage bag full of my clothes, watching their car pull away without a single backward glance. My mother hadn't even gotten out of the vehicle. Just rolled down the window and told Grandma Rose, "We can't do this anymore. She's too much. You raised me, you can raise her too." Too much. That's what I was. Too much to feed, too much to clothe, too much responsibility for 2 people who'd rather spend their weekends partying and their weekdays nursing hangovers. I found out years later that my mother had gotten pregnant with me at 19, and they'd convinced themselves that keeping me would somehow fix their dysfunctional relationship. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Grandma Rose took me in without hesitation that day. She was 68 years old, living on a fixed income in a modest 2-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood in suburban Ohio. She'd already raised 4 children of her own, including my mother, and here she was starting all over again with a traumatized 7-year-old who cried herself to sleep every night for the first 3 months. But she never once made me feel like a burden. Never once suggested I was too much. I remember the first night in her house. She made me hot chocolate, the real kind, with actual cocoa powder and milk and a dash of vanilla extract, not the instant stuff from packets. She sat with me at her kitchen table, the one with the yellow floral tablecloth that was older than I was, and she said something I've never forgotten. "Sweetheart, I need you to listen to me very carefully," she'd said, wrapping my small hands around the warm mug. "What your parents did today, that's on them. That's their failure, not yours. You are not too much. You are not a burden. You are a gift, and I am honored to have you here with me." I didn't believe her then. How could I? When your own parents abandon you, it's pretty hard to accept that you're worth anything at all. But Grandma Rose spent the next 18 years proving it to me, day after day, moment by moment. She showed up to every single school event, even when her arthritis made it painful to walk. She sat through my terrible middle school band concerts and cheered louder than anyone else. She helped me with my homework every night, even though she'd never graduated from high school herself. She worked double shifts at the diner where she waitressed to make sure I had everything I needed, sometimes even things I wanted. When I was 13, I told her I wanted to be a doctor. We were watching a medical drama on TV, and I'd become fascinated with the idea of fixing people, of making them better. Maybe I thought if I could heal others, I could somehow heal the broken parts of myself. She didn't laugh. She didn't tell me it was impossible for a kid from our neighborhood with our limited resources. She just smiled and said, "Then you'll be a doctor. We'll figure it out." And we did. She helped me apply for every scholarship, every grant, every opportunity. She drove me to volunteer at the local hospital in her 20-year-old sedan that barely ran. She stayed up late with me, quizzing me with flashcards she'd painstakingly made by hand. When I got accepted to Johns Hopkins for my undergraduate degree with a full scholarship, she cried for 3 days straight. "Happy tears," she kept saying. "These are happy tears, baby." Medical school was at Yale. I'd gotten accepted to Harvard, Stanford, and Yale, and I chose Yale because it had the best financial aid package, and because Grandma Rose had always wanted to visit New England. She made the trip with me for orientation, and I'll never forget the look on her face when she saw the campus. Pure pride, pure joy. "My grandbaby," she'd whispered to herself. But I heard it. "My grandbaby is going to be a doctor." I called her every single day during medical school. Every single day. Even during my brutal surgery rotations when I was getting 3 hours of sleep and running on coffee and sheer determination, I found time to call her. She'd tell me about her day. Mrs. Henderson's cat had gotten stuck in a tree again. The diner had a new cook who couldn't make biscuits worth a damn. Her book club had just finished reading some romance novel she thought was scandalous and delightful. Those calls kept me sane, kept me grounded, reminded me why I was pushing myself so hard. I graduated top of my class. I matched into a surgical residency at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, one of the most prestigious programs in the country. Grandma Rose came to my medical school graduation despite having just recovered from pneumonia. She sat in that audience for 4 hours, beaming like the sun itself. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, she kept saying my name over and over that day, like she was savoring it. My grandbaby is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Residency was hell. Everyone says it is, but surgical residency is a special kind of hell. 100-hour weeks, life and death decisions, attending physicians who yelled at you for the slightest mistake, patients who died despite your best efforts, the constant exhaustion that seeped into your bones and made you forget what it felt like to be fully awake. But Grandma Rose's voice on the phone every day kept me going. Even when she got older and her memory started to slip a little, even when I could tell she was getting tired more easily, she never missed our calls. And I never missed visiting her every chance I got. Every rare day off, every holiday I could swing, I drove or flew back to Ohio to spend time with her. She was there when I finished my residency. She was there when I completed my fellowship in cardiothoracic surgery. She was there when I joined the surgical team at Cleveland Clinic. I'd deliberately chosen Cleveland because it was close to her, close to home. She was there when I performed my first solo cardiac surgery, a complex valve replacement that went perfectly. And she was there when I started to make a name for myself. Not a huge name, not celebrity doctor famous, but within the medical community, I'd built a solid reputation. I published research. I pioneered a modified surgical technique that reduced recovery time for certain cardiac procedures. I trained younger surgeons. I spoke at conferences. By the time I was 32, I'd become one of the youngest attending cardiothoracic surgeons at Cleveland Clinic, and my name was becoming known in surgical circles across the country. Grandma Rose kept every article, every mention, every award notification. She had an entire bulletin board in her kitchen dedicated to my achievements, covered in newspaper clippings and printed web pages and photos. She'd show it to anyone who came to visit the mailman, her neighbors, the grocery delivery person. "That's my granddaughter," she'd say. "She's a heart surgeon, saves lives every day." I tried to pay her back for everything she'd done for me. Tried to buy her a new house, she refused. Tried to buy her a new car, she refused. Tried to give her money for retirement, she refused. The only thing she let me do was pay for her medical care and help with her house expenses. "I don't need much," she'd say. "I have everything I need right here. And I have you." What she did instead was set up a trust. She called me one day when I was between surgeries and she said, "Sarah, honey, I need you to know something. I've been saving. All these years, every extra penny. I've been investing one of the ladies at church. Her son is a financial advisor, and he's been helping me. I have more than you think, and when I'm gone, it's all yours." "Grandma, don't talk like that," I'd said, feeling that familiar clutch of panic in my chest. The thought of losing her was unbearable. She was 75 then, slowing down but still sharp, still herself. "Hush now, let me finish. It's not millions, but it's substantial. Around 800,000 between savings, investments, and the house. And I want you to have it. Not because you need it, Lord knows you're doing just fine on your own, but because you deserve it. You are my legacy, Sarah. Everything I am, everything I built, it's for you." I cried in the hospital bathroom after that call. Sat on the floor in my scrubs and just cried. She passed away 3 months later. Peacefully, in her sleep. Which is what everyone says to make you feel better, but somehow makes you feel worse. I'd seen her the day before. We'd had lunch together, watched her favorite cooking show, talked about mundane things. She'd hugged me extra long when I left, and I thought maybe she knew. Maybe she was saying goodbye. The funeral was beautiful, I made sure of it. White roses everywhere, her favorite hymns. A reception with all her favorite foods from the diner where she'd worked for 30 years. The whole neighborhood came. Her friends from church, from book club, from the library where she volunteered. They all told me stories about her, how she'd helped them, supported them, made them laugh, how she never stopped talking about her granddaughter, the doctor. And there, in the back, looking completely out of place and deeply uncomfortable, were my parents, Linda and Frank Mitchell. I hadn't seen them in 25 years, and they'd aged badly. My mother's face had the hard, pinched look of someone who'd spent decades being angry at the world. My father had the slack, bloated appearance of a heavy drinker. They were dressed inappropriately for a funeral, she in a garish red dress, he in jeans and a polo shirt that had seen better days. They approached me after the service. After I'd greeted what felt like hundreds of people. After I'd held myself together through sheer force of will. "Sarah," my mother said, and her voice was exactly as I remembered it. Flat, emotionless. "I'm sorry for your loss. Rose was a good woman. Rose. Not your grandmother. Not my mother. Just Rose. Like she was a stranger. She was, I said carefully. Thank you for coming. We should talk, my father said, and there was something in his eyes that made my stomach drop. Something greedy. Something calculating. About the estate. About what happens now. I felt cold all over. The estate is settled. Grandma Rose left very clear instructions. Instructions can be contested, my mother said. And there it was. The real reason they'd come. Not to mourn. Not to pay respects. To stake a claim. She was our mother. We're her rightful heirs. You're not heirs to anything, I said, keeping my voice level even though I wanted to scream. You abandoned her responsibility, me, and she took it on without complaint. You never visited her, never called her, never acknowledged she existed for 25 years. You have no right to anything. We have every right, my father said, his face reddening. Blood is blood, and we're going to fight this. They left before I could respond, but the threat hung in the air like poison. 2 weeks later, I was served with legal papers. They were suing me for half of Grandma Rose's estate, claiming undue influence and mental incompetence on her part. They argued that she'd been manipulated into leaving everything to me, that they deserved their rightful inheritance as her children, that I'd taken advantage of an elderly woman. It was so absurd it would have been funny if it wasn't so vicious. Grandma Rose had been sharp as a tack until the day she died. She'd consulted with lawyers, had the trust reviewed by multiple attorneys, had regular mental competency evaluations because she'd known that they might try something like this. But still, I had to defend it. Had to go through the whole legal process. Had to hire lawyers. Had to gather evidence. Had to have my grandmother's final wishes dragged through court because two people who'd never cared about her suddenly cared very much about her money. The court date was set for 3 months after her death. 3 months of depositions and document reviews and legal wrangling. 3 months of barely sleeping, of performing surgeries during the day and meeting with lawyers at night. 3 months of my parents' attorneys trying to paint me as some kind of manipulative gold digger who'd isolated an old woman and stolen her fortune. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd abandoned me, abandoned her, and now they were claiming I was the villain. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at 4 a.m. in my apartment in downtown Cleveland. I'd barely slept, running through everything in my mind. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, had assured me we had an airtight case. The evidence was overwhelming, but I was still terrified. I dressed carefully. Navy blue suit, white blouse, minimal jewelry, professional, respectable. I wanted the judge to see exactly what Grandma Rose had helped me become. The courthouse was in downtown Cleveland, an imposing building of stone and glass. I met Patricia outside and she gave me a reassuring smile. They have no case, she said. This will be over quickly. But as we walked into the courtroom, I saw them. My parents, sitting with their lawyer, looking smug. My mother saw me and literally rolled her eyes, like I was still that 7-year-old burden she couldn't wait to get rid of. My father just smirked, and then something unexpected happened. The judge walked in, and everyone stood. I glanced up and felt my heart stop. Judge Richard Morrison. I knew him, or rather, he knew me. 6 months earlier, Judge Morrison's wife had come into my OR. Margaret Morrison, 58 years old, acute aortic dissection. She'd collapsed at home, been rushed to the ER, and had about 30 minutes to live without immediate surgical intervention. I'd been the surgeon on call. It had been one of the most complex cases of my career. A type A dissection, the tear extending from the ascending aorta into the arch. I'd spent 7 hours meticulously repairing the damage, replacing the damaged section with a synthetic graft, reconstructing the aortic valve. Every second mattered. Every decision was life or death. She'd survived, not only survived but recovered beautifully. I'd seen her for her 6-month follow-up just 2 weeks before Grandma Rose died, and she'd been doing phenomenally well. She'd hugged me, cried, told me I'd given her life back. Judge Morrison had been there at every visit. He'd shaken my hand, thanked me with tears in his eyes, called me a miracle worker. I'd just told him I was doing my job. And now here he was, looking down at the case file, reading the names. His eyes found mine, and I saw the exact moment he recognized me. His eyebrows shot up. His mouth opened slightly. He looked down at the file again, then back at me, then at my parents. "Wait," he said, and his voice carried through the courtroom. Everyone went silent. "Dr. Mitchell? Dr. Sarah Mitchell is the defendant in this case?" Patricia stepped forward. "Yes, Your Honor." Dr. Mitchell is my client. Judge Morrison sat back in his chair, and I could see him processing this. The woman who'd saved his wife's life was being sued by her own parents for inheriting money from the grandmother who'd raised her. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, he said slowly. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, you are suing your daughter, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, for half of your mother's estate, which she left entirely to Dr. Mitchell in a legally executed trust? My father's lawyer stood up. Yes, Your Honor. We believe the trust was executed under undue influence, and that our clients, as Rose Mitchell's biological children, have a rightful claim to— I'm reading through this file, Judge Morrison interrupted, and his tone had gone cold. And I'm seeing that you, Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, had no contact with your mother for over 2 decades. Is that correct? Your Honor, the circumstances were, the lawyer began. Did you or did you not have contact with Rose Mitchell for 25 years? Yes or no? We did not, Your Honor, but— And during those 25 years, Dr. Mitchell was raised by Rose Mitchell, is that correct? Yes, but— And Dr. Mitchell maintained a close relationship with Rose Mitchell throughout her entire adult life, visiting regularly, calling daily, and providing financial support for her medical care? Your Honor, that doesn't change the fact that— Judge Morrison held up his hand. I'm going to hear testimony, but I'm going to be honest with you. I'm having a very hard time seeing how 2 people who abandoned both their mother and their child have any moral or legal standing to contest a clearly executed trust. He looked at my parents directly. Your mother raised your daughter when you wouldn't. She supported her, loved her, helped her become who she is today. And you want to profit from that now? My mother stood up, her face red. She manipulated her. She turned Rose against us. Mrs. Mitchell, sit down, Judge Morrison said firmly. I will hear all evidence, but you will conduct yourself appropriately in my courtroom. The hearing proceeded, but it was clear from the start how it would end. Patricia presented Grandma Rose's trust documents meticulously prepared, reviewed by 3 different attorneys, with clear statements of her wishes. She presented letters Grandma Rose had written, explaining her decision, detailing the years of abandonment by her children, and the love and support she'd received from me. She presented medical evaluations showing Grandma Rose had been of completely sound mind. My parents' lawyer tried to argue emotional manipulation, but he had no evidence, no proof, nothing but speculation and desperation. When it came time for testimony, I took the stand. My parents' lawyer tried to make it seem like I'd isolated Grandma Rose, like I'd prevented her from seeing her children. Dr. Mitchell, isn't it true that you discouraged your grandmother from contacting your parents? No, I said clearly. My grandmother made her own decisions about her relationships. She never heard from them for 25 years. She didn't need discouraging. But you benefited significantly from her will. I would have traded every penny of that inheritance for one more day with her. And I meant it. God, I meant it with every fiber of my being. The money meant nothing. She'd meant everything. Judge Morrison called a short recess, then returned with his decision. He didn't even sit down. I've reviewed all the evidence in this case, he said, and I'm ruling in favor of Dr. Mitchell. The trust established by Rose Mitchell was legally sound, executed by a competent individual of sound mind, and clearly reflects her wishes. The trust will stand as written. He looked at my parents, and his expression was one of pure disgust. I want to say something to you both. Dr. Mitchell, your daughter saved my wife's life 6 months ago. She performed a 7-hour surgery that required extraordinary skill and gave my wife years she wouldn't have had otherwise. She's one of the finest surgeons in this country. And she became that person because of Rose Mitchell. Because Rose Mitchell gave her the love and support and opportunities that you refused to provide. He paused, letting that sink in. You abandoned your daughter when she was 7 years old. You dumped her on your mother's doorstep and disappeared. You never called, never visited, never sent a birthday card. You treated both of them as if they didn't exist. And now that there's money involved, you suddenly remember your family? My mother tried to speak, but Judge Morrison continued. Rose Mitchell left her estate to the person who deserved it, who earned it through years of love and devotion. You didn't contest the will because you thought it was wrong. You contested it because you're greedy. This case is dismissed with prejudice. You will also pay Dr. Mitchell's legal fees. Get out of my courtroom. It was over. Just like that. My parents' lawyer was packing up his briefcase, looking defeated. My parents sat there, stunned, as if they couldn't believe what had just happened. As they stood to leave, my mother turned to me one last time. You always were ungrateful, she spat. And I laughed. I actually laughed, because the absurdity of it was too much. Ungrateful? For what? For being abandoned? For being treated like garbage? No, you're right. I should be so grateful for that. We gave you life, my father said. No, I replied, and my voice was steady and sure. Grandma Rose gave me life. You just gave birth to me. There's a difference. They left. I never saw them again. Patricia hugged me outside the courtroom. That was one of the most satisfying victories of my career, she said. Judge Morrison came out a few minutes later, in his regular clothes, on his way home. He stopped when he saw me. Dr. Mitchell, he said. I hope that wasn't inappropriate, what I said in there. It was perfect, I told him. Thank you. How is my wife doing, by the way? Her next follow-up isn't for another few months. She's doing wonderfully. The repair is holding beautifully. She should have many more years ahead of her. He smiled and his eyes were warm. Because of you, thank you for that. And I'm sorry you had to go through this today. Your grandmother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was, I said. She really was. I drove to the cemetery after that. It was late afternoon, the sun starting to set, casting everything in golden light. Grandma Rose was buried next to her husband, my grandfather who died before I was born. The stone was simple. Rose Marie Mitchell, beloved grandmother, 1950 to 2023. I sat down on the grass next to her grave, not caring that my suit would get dirty. Hey, Grandma, I said softly. We won. You would have loved what the judge said. He told them exactly what they needed to hear. The wind rustled through the trees, and I chose to believe it was her answering. I miss you so much, I continued. And now the tears came, the ones I'd been holding back through the entire court proceeding. Every day, I miss you. I'll be at work, and something will happen, and I'll think, I have to tell Grandma about this. And then I remember. And it hurts all over again. I pulled up some weeds that had started to grow around the base of her headstone. I'm going to make you proud, though. I'm going to keep doing the work, keep helping people, keep being the person you raised me to be. That's my promise to you. I stayed there until the sun set completely, talking to her, telling her about my cases, about the new research project I was starting, about the junior resident I was mentoring who reminded me of myself at that age, telling her all the things I would have told her on our daily phone calls. Eventually, I had to leave. I had an early surgery the next morning, a complicated bypass that would require my full attention and skill. But I promised her I'd come back. I'd always come back. As I drove home through the darkening streets of Cleveland, past the neighborhoods where I'd grown up, past the house where Grandma Rose had lived, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace, exactly. The grief was still too raw for that. But something like purpose, like determination. My parents had tried to take something from me, but they'd failed. Because what Grandma Rose gave me wasn't something that could be taken away in a courtroom. It wasn't the money, or the house, or the investments. It was the knowledge that I was worth loving, that I was worth fighting for, that I could become more than the circumstances I was born into. She'd taken a scared, abandoned 7-year-old and shown her how to become a woman who saved lives, who fought back, who stood up for herself, who understood that family wasn't about blood, it was about showing up, day after day, year after year, with love and support and unwavering faith. The money from her estate? I put most of it into a foundation in her name, the Rose Mitchell Foundation, dedicated to providing educational support for children being raised by grandparents or other relatives. Scholarships, tutoring, mentorship programs, everything she'd had to scramble and sacrifice to provide for me, we'd make sure other kids had access to. Because that's what she would have wanted. Not for me to hoard her legacy, but to share it, to pay it forward. To be the kind of person who lifts others up the way she lifted me. I kept her house, though. I couldn't bear to sell it. Some weekends, I'd go there and sit in her kitchen at that old table with the yellow floral tablecloth, drinking hot chocolate made the way she taught me. Sometimes I'd invite my mentees from the hospital, young medical students and residents who reminded me of myself. I'd tell them about Grandma Rose, about perseverance, about becoming more than what the world expects of you. Her bulletin board is still on the wall, still covered with all my achievements. I added her obituary to it, right in the center. And sometimes, when I've had a particularly hard day, when I've lost a patient or made a mistake or felt overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility that comes with holding human hearts in your hands, I go there, I stand in front of that bulletin board, and I remember. I remember a 7-year-old girl being dropped off with a garbage bag of clothes. I remember a 68-year-old woman saying, "You are not too much, you are a gift." I remember late-night study sessions and early morning breakfasts and daily phone calls that kept me sane through the hardest years of my life. I remember learning that love isn't about biology. It's about choice, It's about showing up. It's about believing in someone so fiercely that they start to believe in themselves. That's what Grandma Rose taught me. That's her legacy. And my parents? They never got it. They never understood that you can't profit from love you never gave. You can't claim a relationship you never built. You can't show up at the end and expect to reap rewards you never planted. The last I heard, they were living in a trailer park in Florida, still bouncing from job to job, still blaming the world for their problems. I don't hate them. I don't think about them much at all, honestly. They're just people who happen to contribute DNA to my existence. They're not my family. They never were. Grandma Rose was my family. Judge Morrison and his wife, who I still check on regularly, they've become family. Patricia Chen, who sends me a card every year on the anniversary of the court victory, she's family. My colleagues at the hospital, the residents I mentor, the patients whose lives I've saved and who write me letters years later telling me about their grandchildren, they're all family. Family is built, not born. Love is earned, not owed. And legacy is what you leave in people's hearts, not in their bank accounts. Grandma Rose left me everything, not just the money, the values, the strength, the example, the unwavering belief that I was worth investing in. And every single day, every single surgery, every single life I save, I honor that legacy. I honor her. That's the truth. That's my story. And if my parents ever wonder why they lost that day in court, why the judge looked at them with such disgust, why they walked away with nothing, it's because they never understood this simple truth. You can't claim a harvest you never planted. You can't inherit love you never gave. Grandma Rose planted love in me for 25 years. She watered it, nurtured it, protected it from the harsh world, and when she died, that garden bloomed. That was her inheritance to me. That was what she left behind. And no court in the world could take that away.